Hi everyone, it's Nicola Burton here from The Music Means Business. Today I have with me Manny, Michael and Mark from Pushworth.
Oh, morning.
Guys. I also have a very special guest with us today. We've got Christie Dawkins here with us. Now, Christie is one of our most popular artists that we work with. We've worked with her for the past decade. She's an artist who understands the market. She understands the job that's required both on and off stage. And as she's a music teacher and she's responsible for future music artists, she puts her live show experience into good use. She also runs her own company, Vocal Effects, where with her Masters in Vocal Pedagogy, she specialises in assisting artists with their vocal technique. And her strategies are focused on artists who are gigging, who don't necessarily get much time off for their voice to truly recover. But now, after 6 weeks in lockdown and with no gigs, we are hopeful that she can come along and talk to us today about little tips and little guidelines for how you guys can perhaps look at improving your vocals and make the most of this time off that we've got. Christie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's lovely to see you.
No problems. It's good to see you guys too.
So talk to us a little bit about because I know when we have artists that are struggling with their vocals at gigs, which look, we've all had, we've had those experiences as well. We always refer them to you because you're the person that we trust. You're the person on the ground who understands what it's like in every aspect of a gig. Tell me, in this time of lockdown, what do you think an artist could possibly do with their vocals to try and I guess, strengthen and recover until gigs resume in a couple of months?
Well, there's a lot of things that you could do, but the most important things I would recommend is to spend this time wrapping your head around correct breathing and support for singing. Really, when you're on your gigs, support is the most important thing when it comes to being able to hit the high notes, to sing for long periods of time. So I recommend people try to wrap their head around this new form of breathing that we've seen in the last 10 years called accent method breathing. And it's the notion of being able to do what we do when we sleep, tidal breathing, when we're actually using our instruments. So we actually incorporate the 5 pairs of abdominal muscles to draw inwards while we're singing to support the airflow as it's coming out of our vocal tract. So
if you try that now.
Sorry.
Let's all try and do that.
Okay, all right. All right,
I might start snoring. Snoring.
All right, everybody, put your thumbs in your belly buttons, hands on your lower abdominal muscles.
Doing it.
Okay, and what we want to do is feel your stomach moving in while you're making sound, and then as soon as you're finished, you're just going to let it all go. So you're working hard, releasing for the hard work you've just done. When I say hard, I find men tend to try a little too hard. So just observe the stomach's moving in. Don't smash it in, okay? Because that's going to cause a lot of throat tension. We want our throat to be as released as possible. So the idea is to bring the stomach inwards while we're making sound and then release it to allow the air to rush in without us having to, because that's the biggest killer on stage. When you're a gigging musician and you're for air every single phrase, you're causing so much muscle tension in your throat that compounds over about 4 hours of singing. Even after an hour of singing, you'll feel excessive throat tension. So we want to try and stop this loud inhalations. And the way we do that is to notice that the diaphragm wants to recoil when we allow our abdominal muscles to move inwards. And that allows us to have a lot more release in our throat and support down here. It's also going to fill the lungs to their maximum, which means suddenly our sound wave is a lot thicker. That's obviously going to relate to a much more impressive sound wave and increased ability for a richer resonance in the vocal tract, all these fun things. Sorry, I digress. Let's get back to experimenting. So I'm going to make some funny sounds and I want you to copy me. And while we make these sounds, notice your stomach moving inwards while we do it. So we're going to start with the SH sound with no voice, just the air. We're going to go shh. Your turn. Good. F. Good. The TH sound. Good. And the S. So what we're doing on all of these sounds is we're allowing the sound to come out. All right, let's add voice now. It'll make a little bit more sense. So when we're making sound, our stomach's moving inwards. When we're allowing the air to come in, our stomach just totally releases. So I'll give you an example. So if watch my hand, because you'll see it move more. So I'm going to breathe in, stomach goes out, zzz, and then I'll let it go. Zzz, let it go. Zzz, let it go. And in that motion of letting it go, the air rushes in. So let's try it again with sound this time. So those 4 sounds that we just made will now be voiced. Sorry, Nikki?
No, good.
Okay, good. Okay, so on a Z sound, we're going to feel our stomachs moving in while we're making sound. Very good. Did you all feel your stomachs moving inwards that time?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yep. And as soon as you finish making sound, notice this time that your stomach's going to release into your hand. The acronym that singers use is SPLAT. Janice Chaplin came up with the concept, and it stands for Singers Please Loosen the Abdominal Tension. So the 5 pairs of abdominal muscles that drive the abdominal area upwards to control that airflow need to release in order for that air to rush in. So let's try a few of them and we'll see if we can get that happening. So let's go. Good. Good.
Oh, good noises, right, mate. Good noises.
I know. I'm rehearsing for the journey.
Nice. So as ridiculous as it might seem, and you know, there'll be a lot of stuff online about accent method breathing. I've certainly got a lot as well. I'm running Zoom classes over this period, so if anyone wants more information about accent method breathing, by all means, or about for any vocal health and longevity tips, definitely I can be reached. Okay, so we talked about breathing and support, very, very important. Now, the other thing that I find gigging artists do a lot, especially your male guitarists who have spent their entire life learning their craft, but their voice has just been a secondary instrument that they've never really invested much time in. Yep. It's just a concept of sing the notes, play along, and it doesn't matter what my voice is doing. As people are aging, we're starting to realize that our voice isn't holding up on gigs, because as we age, all of the cartilage in our vocal tract starts to solidify, so it doesn't want to work as well as it used to when we were much younger. And that's why the young ones can get away with poor technique without it being so obvious. And as we age a little bit, we become a little bit more aware that there is a lot of fatigue that can incur if we're not careful about how we use our instrument. So working on a breath support while we're singing would be to grab a straw, steal one from McDonald's, or I can't actually find biodegradable organic ones that are this round, but these are the thick ones. I purchased these from IKEA, but they're really, really good for just testing the breath flow. So what we can do is pop the straw in our mouth, put our hand over the end, and make sure that while we're making sound, we can hear the air flowing through the straw, as well as feel the air hitting the hand. Okay. We can also do it by holding our hand up against our mouth to feel that airflow, but it's a little bit more effective with the straw, and the straw will actually build up a lot of muscle support as well. So we want to try and focus the whole time we're creating a tone on sending air outwards, because like I said, a lot of people who haven't had a background in learning how to sing tend to support all of their sound with their throat. And in doing so, especially if we're at the end of every phrase, every line of a song, we'll have so much tension that we won't find that the air will flow through properly. So it's really important in this period where we're working on our instruments to try and improve them for when gigs start coming in again. It'd be really beneficial to learn about how to keep that air flowing while you're singing. So supporting your sound as the air's coming up and sending the air out while you're singing. 2 most valuable things.
2 great tips, everyone. Christy, thank you. We're going to be putting all your information on our post so that everyone knows how to find you. I know as an artist myself, as a vocalist, losing my voice just became part of, the show. After 5 nights, you were just stuff. So that was really good to have that. Thank you. And I know Michael and Mark have got some questions for you, because they're the guys that are referring artists to you on a regular basis when the venue says, look, that guy's great, but he's got some problems with his voice. So guys, what would you like to ask Christie?
Yeah, I think with hi Christie, with the weather now changing as well, so people are out of practice. Well, some of them are out of practice if they've been lazy, and the weather's getting a little bit colder as well. So I don't know, you know, I've noticed their throat's being a little bit dry and that sort of thing. Is there any recommendations with being out of practice, but also colder weather coming in?
I recommend always wearing a scarf. I live in scarves around winter because your throat is going to become cold very quickly, obviously, if your body's cold. And the whole principle of warming up for singing is in vain if you're in a cold environment and your body's actually cold. It's not going to work effectively. So keeping rugged up would be really beneficial. Lots of people around this time would go to having hot beverages to keep warm as well, and I would recommend to be very careful with that, because if you are practicing any belting, which is essentially anything louder than you're talking, whether it be low or high singing, and a lot of instrumentalists and singers don't understand the concept that belting is anything louder than what our talking volume is. Once you do project your voice a little further, you can do a lot of damage if you've just had a hot beverage. There is some research out there to say that vocal hemorrhages, which is vocal fold hemorrhages, which is basically a tear in the vocal fold, can happen quite readily if you have a hot tea while trying to belt, or within 20 minutes. Of belting. So be very careful with hot beverages and singing. Certainly half an hour beforehand is probably the least time I would wait before trying to sing, but definitely while gigging, don't be drinking hot drinks in between. And same goes for cold drinks. If you drink cold drink, you're doing exactly the same as what how I answered your question initially, Michael. You'd be just making everything cold again. It's really counterproductive. So be very mindful about your throat. Good.
Cool. Look, my query for you, Christie, would be more so down the sort of emotional ends of things. Obviously, we've had a pretty serious sort of few weeks over the last little while. Everyone's a little bit under the weather emotionally. And obviously emotion, not being a singer, it's a little bit different for me, but obviously I hear it sort of from the coalface. But what sort of things, you know, what can people do around the emotional side of things when obviously it's so tough at the moment? Are there things you can recommend that will help out down that line?
There are a lot. I mean, everyone perceives emotion in different ways. I guess our experiences are all going to be different. And certainly I think the biggest one for musicians in this climate is money and the stress about how to make ends meet, especially when our livelihood is being taken away from us. Yeah. So my recommendation would be there's actually some really good apps that you can get. I wish I knew them off the top of my head, but I don't. Get back to me, I can find them. They're really good meditation and breathing apps that just provide people with a sense of calmness and how to learn how to develop a sense of calmness around this time when you do have a lot of stress going on. Because as I'm sure you're all aware, when we're emotionally charged, the first place it's going to affect is our voice. Our throat is going to be very tight. That is going to hugely affect the quality of tone. And even in our practice, if we're stressed and we're trying to practice and our throat's really tight, we're going to feel a real sense of discontent after a period of practicing on a really tense throat. So I would recommend trying to find something that enables you to meditate and to just try to learn how to reset. And it's a good time to be able to do it, you know, when we do have a lot of stress, but we know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't forever.
No, right. That's great. Thank you.
Well, I've got Christie, I've got a recording question.
Sure.
In downtime, we've got a lot of I look after more the touring and the recording side, and especially now with the development of the Manic label. So we've got a few artists at the moment in the studio. It's really interesting to see how their vocal, I suppose it differs between what they do during the day and what they do at evening, how long they've recorded for, and the dynamism that we end up at various times of the day. So I guess the question is, in the studio, are there any little tips you might be able to give to these artists? Because there are certain artists that say to me, wow, I just couldn't get my vocals together during the day. And I guess that's a body clock issue, because they're so set in their ways of playing live and singing at night that their body has acclimatized to that. Are there any little tips or tricks that we could use to maybe warm up, to get the vocal in line with what they do in the evening, in the recording studio during the course of the day, so to speak?
Definitely. Well, there are so many things that you could do for that. And the most important, I just can't stress enough, is get a good night's sleep. Sleep is the biggest killer of your voice. I mean, I'm sure that you've all found if you try to gig when you're tired, your fingers don't want to work, your voice is just not doing what you want it to do. You won't have the energy to support your sound properly. So sleep is number one importance. I would recommend for any recording artists that they don't start until at least 10 o'clock in the morning. But some might even want to record at night rather than during the day, because like you said, they're acclimatized to what they do. And that's okay if you've got a studio that'll work with you through those hours. It's really, really important that people be warmed up. And accent method breathing, they say 5 minutes of accent method breathing is the equivalent in terms of warming up your voice to 20 minutes of vocal exercises. That's a really big thing, because the idea of warming up is exactly the same as stretching before you run a marathon. You need to bring blood to those muscles as fast as possible. And accent method breathing does it in such a gentle way that doesn't produce any unnecessary tension in the throat, unless you're doing it wrong. Like I mentioned before, men have a tendency to try too hard. That brings tension in the throat. So warm up using accent method breathing. Another thing that you could do in the studio when I know when I have girls who find it particularly hard to get high, and it's very common for people to suddenly go, oh, I tried it, I didn't succeed, so I'm just not any good at this, I'm not going to be able to, my voice isn't doing this. And the best thing you can do is revert to a tongue trill or a lip trill, which you learn when learning how to use accent method breathing. So we or those sorts of things. For me, I love the lip trill, as dumb as it looks, because it has air coming down as well as up. So it enables us to actually achieve those notes so much easier. And so if someone's having an issue with a particular tone or reaching a particular note, I would say revert to your lip trill first, try to see how effective that is, and just spend about 5 minutes exercising the voice on a lip trill, going up and down the range, and then going back into it and seeing how they feel. You might find if they're having issues in a studio, it's going to come down to not supporting their sound properly, allowing nerves to get in the way, which is going to bring in throat tension, or not allowing the breath flow to actually be working efficiently. So those are definitely some things I'd look at. And then obviously having appropriate fluids. So alcohol, caffeine, dehydrate the vocal folds. Coconut water, especially room temperature, I find is brilliant. I even find lemonade is really good. I don't have it too cold. So, you find what works for you, but stay away from dairy if you're lactose intolerant, because it produces way too much mucus. Too much mucus on the vocal folds will cause a whole lot of noise in the vocal folds if you're trying to achieve a really clear sound, obviously. So, yeah.
Great.
Oh, that is great.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Christie.
No problems.
Manny's thinking of going into the studio doing his version of April Sun in Cuba.
Absolutely.
We heard Manny sing it enough.
Yeah, I know.
Christie, you have just given everyone who's watching this today some incredible information, some great tips. We are so grateful that you came to join us today. And to everyone watching this, I'll put in the post all of the information so that you can get on to Christie. We recommend her. She's really the only person that we work with when it comes to vocal pedagogy, simply because she understands what it's like to gig. Now, a lot of singing teachers actually don't understand that. that Christie does. Christie, it has been wonderful to speak to you and to see you. And
yes, thank you.
We hope to see you again very soon, and we're going to leave it at that. And thank you everyone for joining us today. See you next time.
Thanks, Christie.
See you.